Welcome to NovoEDTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric, capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of NovoEDTalks podcast, a place for training trailblazers to get real. I'm Lynn Christensen Esker of NovoEd, and today I'm joined by Andrea Whittaker, a learning and development leader at Mars, one of the largest privately held companies in the US and a multinational manufacturer of food products. Andrea, welcome to NovoEDTalks.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Let's start off with a little bit about your background. Maybe you can also touch on your emphasis on culture and leadership.
Yeah, for sure. So my formal training or educational background is actually elementary education. So I was a elementary school teacher for 5 years before making the shift to the corporate world, which was interesting to say the least. But I love the transition I've been able to make, and I've been in the Mars ecosystem for about 10 years. So the first 5 was actually with Banfield Pet Hospital, which is part of the Mars Veterinary Health segment. And then 5 years ago, I joined Global Mars University, and I've had a couple different roles with them. I started out as a social learning coach, which was a very different role than anything I've ever had in learning, and I loved it. And then made the shift over to learning experience manager, and now my current role, which is similar to that, but as a senior learning experience lead.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the Mars University? That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so Mars University is our global learning organization within Mars. So it's made up of 2 key organizational groups. The Strategic Capabilities Group, which does a lot of the needs analysis and partnership with the business to better understand what they might need in terms of learning. They also look into other strategic ways that they may address challenges the businesses are facing. And they partner with what are called colleges, so functional colleges, so research and development, sales, commercial, you name it, all the different functions we have, they partner closely with those colleges to align on what their priorities are. And then I sit on the MGS, or Mars Global Services learning side of things. And we're the ones who actually take that needs analysis and translate that into what learning will be. So everything from design all the way through to implementation. So it's a little bit of a unique setup. It takes some getting used to, especially if you're used to doing the full end-to-end development, as I was when I worked for Banfield. But it does make interesting collaboration. And I think that across the board, it's just a more robust experience that we end up having for our clients internally.
And how do your learners respond to that? And are they does that help them equip them to be agile going forward?
I think broadly our learners don't really know like how that we're 2 different groups, that that they're getting something that is coming from sometimes months and months of work, It's certain complex programs. Certainly, it can take a year or a little bit more to develop that from the initial conversation strategic capabilities has through to us actually deploying the solution to them. So I think broadly, they just see us as Mars University, kind of as the brand. They don't really know the parts, right? So it's a unique, it's sometimes interesting too because we have a platform named My Mars U, and so sometimes people refer to that as Mars U, and I have to ask, are you talking about the platform? Are you talking about the actual people who do this learning work for you? So can pose some unique challenges, but broadly, I think our learners just see the product. They don't necessarily see, as one of my colleagues says, they don't see how the sausage is made. So
I think that's the case a lot of the
yeah,
time, right?
totally, totally.
So you
Yeah.
mentioned having your own platform. So what role does technology play in your programs, and how do you leverage those technologies and those tools to enhance learning and those kinds of experiences for employees?
Yeah, as you can imagine, in a global, very matrix um, ecosphere that is Mars Incorporated with, multiple segments, various regions, various business units, it can get complicated. And so we do have one LMS that we leverage, and then we also have an LXP, where a lot of user-generated content actually goes there. Certainly, some of the things that we produce occasionally do go on that platform, that LXP as well. But actually, we're in the midst right now of really looking at our tech stack and evaluating what do we need. And certainly, AI needs have brought in an interesting component to that. So we've been doing little pilots of different platforms over the last year or so, and I would anticipate more to come as we explore what's going to provide the best, most seamless experience, and that is I think the key word there is seamless. Uh, Again, in a matrix organization, it's so difficult to give people one entry point. And that's been an ongoing kind of like opportunity for us. How do we create a more seamless single point of entry, that sort of thing? And we're still trying to work out those kinks. So I know a real focus is looking at our tech stack and evaluating what we can do going forward to make that a little bit better for our learners.
Sounds great. So what advice would you give to people since you are so globalized and hybrid? How do you build that dynamic teamwork and instill the capabilities and skills that are needed?
Yeah, it certainly is easier said than done. We do have a really close, the team that I'm part of on MGS Learning is called the Learner Experience Team. So obviously we're very focused on what does the learner need and want. And I think that's usually the frame we try to pose things back to people in is how can we create this in a way that it's going to be best for the learner and challenging in a productive way, like when it's like, well, we can only do this. Well, can we, what else might we do? How might we do that? And so asking some of those questions and trying to build relationships both internally and with other, vendors and things that we leverage to try and figure out how might we solve some of these problems in a really like principled way. When I say principle, Mars has 5 principles, so that drives a lot of our decision making. So how we're being efficient, mutual, making good use of the resources we have. So how do we put all those things together and make sure we're making decisions that are principled and in the best interest of what we're trying to achieve? So I think one thing for me that I often go back to, which seems so basic, is our learning objectives. Like, what are you actually trying to get this learner to be able to know, do, apply? How are we trying to change them? And based on that, I think that's how we drive some of that because to me, my approach to a lot of things is how can we make it the simplest approach that gets them there in the cleanest way, right? And so to me, going back to those learning objectives and saying, we want them to be able to apply this. So I don't think we need an hour-long e-learning. We need to create some basic like learning journey guides or application guides, that sort of thing that might just be a Word document, but it's getting them out there to actually practice. And then what's the feedback loop for that, right? How do we make sure that they're getting feedback in the moment in a safe space and they feel confident in applying things? Because I think that's one of the challenge we often face is our internal clients want to have big behavioral impacts and they're asking an e-learning to do that. And that's a big ask of an e-learning. And I think most learning professionals would agree, and it's not an uncommon challenge that we face. So how do we just, in some regards, get back to basics and or start leveraging some of these other components that we have access to, like AI that can do, like there's some great coaching platforms out there that are AI based, where you don't have to have everyone in a room and role playing like we used to. You can leverage the AI component to do that, and they get to practice having a difficult conversation um, with an associate, that sort of thing. So I think it's how do we leverage the technology, but also not over engineer it so that we don't make it so complex that it doesn't meet the need anymore.
I noticed that you talked about feedback, and now you're kind of talking about sort of that practice. What role does like social learning play for you?
Yeah, I mentioned in my intro my social learning coach role. That's one of my favorite roles I've ever had as a learning professional. It's because we were able to actually focus on that 20%. But to me, in the way I've explained it, like the 20% of learning from others or social learning or whatever you want to call it in the 70-20-10 model kind of bridges that 10% of formal learning and the application, right? It's where you get to practice or learn from others or ask questions so that you feel more confident in applying that sort of thing. And so when I was in that role, we really focused on a lot actually on users who were generating their own content within the business and helping them to see how they could take it beyond just a webinar or a short video, that sort of thing, and talk to them about how you bring it to life. And we created some different templates and things like that they could leverage, like action hours. So how do you present some information and then work together to generate some ideas about how you might solve a problem or how you might work differently or how you might apply that knowledge. We Another platform was course clubs. So, we're not leading these, but here's some discussion guide templates you might use to kind of do what we call course clubs. So existing content, look at those and kind of treat it like a book club and have someone kind of leading those sessions, but just asking general questions, right? I think there's a lot of value in that. And a lot of what we hear from learners about wanting in-person session, you can actually replicate in a virtual setting if you do it if you just think a little bit differently. So, trying to create some of those experiences, being able to one-on-one consult with people who are in the business doing that. So, being so close to the people in the business, in that experience was really great. And I think now we're trying to carry that through more into our more broad programs, and how do we build those components in and really show up as consultants to the business and say, hey, I get that you're asking for an e-learning, but based on what you're trying to achieve, this building like a limited time or a little limited duration community around this topic in this way would be really helpful. Or here's some practical application components we think you should build in that are going to take this program from, good to an amazing impact, right? And I think That's one of the biggest challenges is just getting people who aren't in the learning field to understand that. And so I think one way I try to influence is putting things in more practical terms to people, or just talking about asking them to share an experience where they felt like they really learned something well. Um, because then it helps them to see, oh, I see it. Yes, I did do some formal learning, but I'm sharing examples of having conversations with people, or, having practice sessions, role playing, whatever the case may be. If you ask someone what their most impactful learning experience is, I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say this e-learning really changed my life and my behavior. Most people are like, oh yeah, I just click through those. So I think it's, getting people to tap into the more personal side of things, um, and showing, and then us also showing up as consultants, not just, doers of the things, right? So how are we getting better as learning professionals about influencing our clients and stakeholders to move towards some of these best practices?
Yeah, the e-learning thing is, I think, what a lot of people in the business tend to think of it is, but it's really way more than that. And you mentioned mentorship at one point, I think. What role does that play in what it is that you do?
Yeah, I think formally, I don't know that we really set up a ton of mentorship programs as part of learning programs, but I think we think about how might we set up like a community of practice or a workplace community, whatever you want to call it. And then I kind of also say like limited duration communities. So cohorts of are a great example of that, but doesn't always have to be that like kind of formal or stringent, because then you can have people who've already gone through kind of supporting people who are now doing something. Um, and so I think that's kind of like more a different way I've thought about mentorship. But then also I think we do have some formal mentorship programs, and um, certainly I appreciate those contacts and mentors I've had throughout my career who have been able to support me with that. But I think that was something we saw more of in when I was a social learning coach, people wanting to set up mentorship programs, especially within like our associate resource groups, that sort of thing. I do know this was not necessarily a learning initiative. I know that we provided a little bit of coaching, but one of our women's associate resource groups actually has a whole mentorship platform they built, kind of like I'm not sure all the details, but they built something really incredible so that women can help to be mentoring other women throughout their careers and things like that. So I think we tend to see it more, the mentorship component in those types of pockets than in our actual like formal learning programs that we focus on. But certainly there are times where we try to engage senior leaders to come in and kind of support a cohort, things like that through formal leadership programs so that they can share. I think when you do things like that, it's sharing not just the great wins and the best practices, but also where those senior leaders made mistakes or wish they had a magic wand and could go back and change things. And it makes us all human, right? I think it just sets it all back that this person isn't perfect. Yes, they're a senior leader, but they got there the same way we all do, which is hard work and messing up and learning from those mistakes and moving forward. So,
Exactly. Well, speaking of being human, I want to talk about sort of the opposite of that, but is it really opposite? AI, that's the big
yeah.
elephant in the room, right? How do you make sure that AI is accomplishing your goals, which are very sort of personal to the learner, but how is it helping you, or is it?
I think it's always evolving, right? And I think we see I remember my previous line manager, she brought up Chat GPT. I want to say it was like 2023, right? We did like a little use case with just how much time are we saving with like drafting emails or doing some different things, and just as a small group of like three of us, and we were testing it out. And I think even from just a couple of years ago, from last year, things have progressed so greatly. And so I think we're all trying to stay caught up with what is happening. But I think definitely all of us on my team, I know, use it in different ways. I know we're all very excited because we recently got like an internal AI similar to like Chat GPT that we can actually put like not a ton of like really sensitive proprietary information into, but we don't have to be quite as cautious with what we're adding into the platform. And so I know, that's just happened in the last few months. And so that's really exciting for us to be able to do things. And I've asked it to do stuff like, how would you outline a course about storytelling? How would you, and just I treat it like I would a colleague. I think I heard that explained at a conference I went to last year. There was a speaker talking about the role of AI, and that was something I really took from it. And it is true, I'm on the West Coast. A lot of my coworkers are on Central, Eastern, or even in the UK time zones. So sometimes I'm working later than the rest of them and I have something, I just get stuck. So I do treat it like a colleague. Like if I was going to walk over to someone's desk and say, hey, how would you word this? Like I'm missing this word, I need help. And that's how I treat it. And I think the other key part for me is that human validation, right? Like, yes, treat it like your colleague, and also know even sometimes with our colleagues, we verify and validate the information they give us, right? So we should be doing the same with AI. So I think, we're starting to use it to help create videos, translations, I think is going to be a big key for us. Um, I can also see it again in that like coaching space or live feedback type stuff. I think there's a learning curve, right? So we'll keep learning, we'll keep adapting, we'll keep seeing what's meeting the needs, and there's going to be more things continuously coming our way. So, um, I think and I hope there will always be a human component to what we do. It's just going to enable us to be able to do more. Like, I truly hope, because there's so many times where it's like we can only do this e-learning because that's all we have the capacity to do. If we're able to activate, create, develop e-learnings or videos or whatever the case may be a little bit faster, to me, I think that creates the capacity for us to focus more on the social components, the applicative components, that sort of thing. And even in the social learning space, a lot of times the reason people don't or want to do an e-learning is because it's you finish it and it's done until you need to edit it in a couple of years, right? The ongoing stuff is what is hard for people to make the space for in the business. So, I think that's my hope too, is we'll continue to see that evolution of AI so that, you know, you have bots that can answer some general questions, but then if there's things that they can't answer, they know the people to tag, the humans to tag to come in and answer those questions. So I think that there's more gains to be made. It's only time will tell. But certainly we are cautious about, making sure we validate the information we're using, and also the platforms we invest in, that sort of thing.
And making sure that that information is proprietary and doesn't
Yes, and
get used up.
safe.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Certainly like IT security is a massive topic at Mars. And the team that does the training, ongoing training for that group does amazing work. And so yes, I would be remiss to say like we need to make sure that we're being really safe with the data that we put in, and cautious and thoughtful, and but I think those are all good things, like we should be thinking that way, regardless of whether or not we have the fear of causing a data leak, like that we should just be thinking that way in general.
I totally agree. We're going to wind down a little bit here, but before we close, I wanted to ask you, what's the most important lesson you've learned as a leader that you'd pass on to someone early in their workforce development career?
It's such a great question. And I think for me, it's you don't have to know it all, right? Like you don't have to always have the answer. I think being able to say, that's a great question, and I'm going to find out for you, or let's figure that out together is so impactful and I think empowering in a lot of ways because when I was early on in my career, especially coming from the educational space into the corporate space, I did have I was afraid, I was scared I was gonna mess up. I was scared I didn't know things and I was lucky to have people to help me learn, but also I think, you do know a lot of stuff and we all have different skill sets. There are folks who know more about accessibility certainly than I do. I tend to know more a little bit about social learning. We all have different interests. And so how do you lean on your colleagues to fill in those gaps? Um, and just own like it's okay to not know everything and we're not AI, we're not robots, right? None of us are perfect. We're all going to mess up. And, as a leader, I think it is super powerful to show people that you don't think that you're the be all end all. And so just saying, great question, let's find out. I think that's what I've shared with people early in their career is don't don't be so afraid. It's okay. It's okay if you don't know. You can figure it out. You can learn. Um, it's feedback is a gift and you can take it and use it to grow. And I also say sometimes feedback is the gift that you're gonna just, donate to Goodwill. So just you figure that out along the way too, Sometimes you gotta take it in and self-reflect, but some feedback's not always as viable as others.
Well, I found that to be absolutely true in my
Yeah.
career too.
Yes. Yes.
Andrea, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a fun conversation and your perspectives have been really insightful. I hope you enjoyed being with us and sharing some of your insights.
Yes, this was so fun. Thanks for having me. I'm truly honored to be here and share just what I do know.
Well, you know a lot.
Oh, well, thank you.
So thank you to you, and thanks to everyone else, our audience here, for joining us for this episode. And see you next time on the NovoEd Talks podcast.